Hello, hello, friends. Welcome to Navigating Religious OCD. My name is Sariah Harrison, and I experience religious OCD, also known as scrupulosity. Scrupulosity is an incredibly anxious reality that hijacks your religious experience. Today, I have Quinn here with me. He also experiences scrupulosity. He's here to share pieces of his story and his experience. Quinn, thanks for joining me today. Glad you're here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so diving in, Quinn, let's just start with your story. Tell me just a general overview of your journey to learning about your experience with scrupulosity and how that came about. Like, when did you learn or realize you were experiencing it?
I feel like my first time where I felt anxious about it was I remember one time I think I was in middle school really. I don't remember exactly what happened, but I saw stuff on social media that I think now I would recognize probably was something that I could just say, I guess I just won't look at that again. But in my mind, I was like, this is terrible. And so, but then I didn't think about anything at that point. And then I remember weeks later, I was mowing the lawn and I just had this sense of doom come upon me. And I ran inside and had to tell my parents. I felt like if I didn't tell my parents, something was going to happen. And then for a while I didn't think about it, but then it started to creep up in my mind and I just felt like I needed to confess. And that kept happening. And even through high school, I felt like it kind of derived from a sense of I do something that that was wrong, but was something that I could just overcome and work through. But in my mind, I felt like unless I confessed it, something terrible would happen. But confessing didn't really fix the problem. So that was kind of my first experience with it.
Well, that's so interesting. So I'm hearing this, how you described the feeling of this sense of doom. Was it also massive amounts of guilt? Is that another way that you would? But
Yeah.
I not trying to project anything onto your experience, but I was just relating as you were talking there. I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's totally how I would describe so much of just lots of guilt and
Yeah.
then concern that something terrible, awful would happen if I didn't do X, Y, or Z, right?" And it's sounding like for you in this setting, it was confessing, right? I think that's something
Yeah.
that's so huge with scrupulosity that often goes really um overlooked, especially in a religious community, because confessing or being truthful about things is a really awesome value, right? But I think where it becomes really difficult with scrupulosity is anxiety is what's driving it, right? This sense of anxiety of something terrible will happen if I'm not completely honest about having done this or having seen this, right? Whatever it is. That's super interesting. So that was in middle school? Is that when that whole experience was? Is that what you said?
Yeah. I
Did I
think,
hear that right?
I think that's when it kind of started. And then through high school, um, I think it all kind of came from there was a couple months span when I was a freshman in high school where I was looking at stuff that I shouldn't have been. And it was something that could easily be nipped in the bud, but I feel like I felt so much remorse and guilt that it felt like it wasn't. I'm not sure. I just think that experience was the only time I've ever had problems with that stuff. But that experience just did something in my mind where ever since then, my mind was just hyper aware of anything that I did wrong that could resemble anything sort of like sexual sin. And it just spiraled from there. And every time I tried to relieve that feeling, it would I'd feel relief for a very short time. And then it would just be something even crazier that I felt like I needed to confess or tell somebody.
Yeah. And that is so much of how the anxiety cycle works, right? It's that if I don't I absolutely have to confess or else something terrible will happen. But then you confess, and because it's driven
But
by
it doesn't help.
anxiety, it doesn't help, right? Yeah. No, that is something that, oh my goodness. That's where I think the anxiety cycle, the term vicious, the vicious anxiety cycle, I'm yeah, that's a good adjective for that because it really
Yeah.
does just compound, right? It just builds on itself. Oh, that's so awful. Man. So how did it show? Okay, so you've discussed that it showed up in your life in a lot of ways where you just felt this hypervigilance across the board and this need to just be super um aware, conscientious of different little things that you were doing. making sure that you were, like, staying away from any appearance of evil. Is that accurate? Just kind of hypervigilance, I guess, is what I'm getting at. Maybe expand on that a little bit more if I expressed that in a way that wasn't totally in line with your experience.
Yeah, I feel like I didn't have a really good grasp of, like, what's okay and what's not. Like, I felt like I was searching for some sort of black and white line because I feel like we're taught it's 2025, 2026. Like, this at this point in life, like, there's there's no black and white, hard and fast rules. Like, we need to just between us and God. But in my mind, I'm like, but I'm also told, like, these are the things that are wrong. And so there was just I felt like there was nothing. I was like, okay, well, everything feels wrong. And so it made it tough to, like, be in relationships. It just made it really difficult to express any sort of affection or anything because I would second guess everything in my head. And I think that makes it really difficult for a partner too, because they're like, how am I supposed to show that I like you if everything makes you feel like you did something wrong? So it's just like yeah, everything just spiraled.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. Okay, so we're, like, getting into some fun stuff here because it like, I've seen in my life, like, I didn't realize, like, how much of my life, like, literally every piece of my life was being impacted by this underlying struggle with scrupulosity, and I think you hit on so much of what scrupulosity is there. Like, it's not only in religious settings, right? Like, it's also anxiety about moral issues, and so just, like, being super concerned about doing things right and making sure that you're not doing things wrong. That's how I've seen scrupulosity show up a lot for me. So that's really interesting in the relationship regard. I have definitely experienced this struggle. And also in my relationship with God, like it was really difficult for me to have any sort of relationship with God because I was so concerned with the black and white, like you were saying, or the rules over the relationship. And it's so interesting that you also noticed that in your relationship with others, right? Is there anything more that you would like to share along that line? Yeah, like with the experience with OCD or anxiety, how it impacted your relationships with other people.
Yeah, I feel like in high school, I just never I didn't really like I dated, but I just never really even when I had a girlfriend, like at the end of high school, I just never I feel like it was very surface level because I just knew I was like, I just don't think I can handle anything. I just knew that I already just felt like intense guilt whenever anything related to like sexual sin or anything that and a lot of times it wasn't even related really at all. I think that my mind just was like, that's wrong. And so it just made it so I felt like I couldn't even be in a relationship. And then when I left on my mission, I do feel like I feel like I was blessed, but partly it's because you have no relationships on your mission with the opposite sex. And so I like it didn't there were still some times where like I feel like if anybody's listening and feels like they've had felt like they need to confess anything weird, I probably confessed something weirder. And it's just like on my mission, it's like you're not dating, you're not doing anything, but it's like I just always felt like I was doing something wrong, or I was like, I don't know, I maybe something happened and I liked it or whatever, and then I felt like I needed to confess it. But for the most part of my mission, I feel like I feel like I was very blessed there and was able to focus because I was really scared that I wasn't going to be able to serve a mission because I was like, I don't like in high school, I was like, I don't know if I've ever really felt the spirit because I just have this layer of guilt that's preventing me, or the idea of feeling the spirit would make me feel even more guilty. And then I'd be like, oh, I'm not feeling it, which obviously means I did something wrong. And then it just like spirals from there. And then
That
as soon
spiral's
as
the
I
worst.
got, yeah, yeah, it just like, it just made it so much worse. But, and then once I got home from my mission, it just came right back with dating and everything. And I think it just made it really hard because I would like want to, like, I had a girlfriend pretty soon after, but I feel like it was just like, it just put a ton of pressure on your partner because they're like, how am I supposed to be like a 50-50 relationship, but it almost felt like my anxiety was controlling our relationship rather than us. It was like we can make boundaries with each other, until my anxiety tells me what is actually right or wrong, and then everything is different. So that made it super difficult. And then a couple years later, once I met my wife, I felt like it was same type of thing, and even got to the point where I felt like my anxiety was me. That was the first time where I felt like it had moved on from just like doing something wrong that needs to be confessed to the point where it was just like second guessing everything because my anxiety was like, telling me that everything was like our maybe our relationship is wrong, or I'm not thinking clearly, so how can we keep going? And it got to a really bad point where my now wife, spoiler, it was just I feel like she was like, I really want this to continue, but how am I supposed to continue when everything seems dictated by, like, it was like, we can't be together or be intimate without you feeling like you did something wrong. Like no levels was, I don't know, I just felt like everything was dictated by my anxiety. And so eventually it like came to a boiling point where we basically like broke up for a day because in my mind I was like, I just can't do it. I don't feel like this is right. When looking back, I was just super anxious, just could not handle it. And so eventually my mom made me go get on anxiety medication, and that like changed my life. And ever since then I've struggled, but I felt like it's been so much better once I realized like, okay, this is something um that medication can address. I think that really changed things for me. Anyways, I don't know if that
That's so, so
answers your
good.
question, but
Yeah, no, that totally did. That was great. That I'm so glad. As I was just, like, listening, I was like, "Okay, so the question is, like, what helped? Like,
yeah.
what were you led to? What did God or others lead you to that, like, was so helpful?" And it sounding like the medication was what was so, so helpful for you in that situation. Was there anything else? Like, actually, I'm curious to know the other question that came up as you were talking, what was what's your wife's name? I don't think I've ever met her.
Olivia,
Liv.
word live,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, fun, fun. So, what was her experience or understanding of anxiety as you guys were dating, and how did that impact the relationship? Like, she had to have some level of understanding to not just be like, "This is too much." Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's something that
Yeah,
I've been, like, so worried about in my relationships. I'm like, people just don't get it. Like, they don't like, this is, like, anxiety on a different level, and it's, like, debilitating at times, and there's often just that sense of, like, how will people, like, ever understand this or be willing to come along on the ride with this, right? Like, even just friends, I'm like, "This is just a lot." So, anyways, that's a long-winded question, but what was her experience like with that?
yeah, I mean, I think I was fortunate that she'd experienced her own type of anxiety in life where it was different than scrupulosity, but I felt like she still understood what it was and kind of the anxiety cycle. Like, I think she was able to recognize when and like stop helping me feed into it and be able to tell me like, you're just in a cycle right now, like it's not going to help. But I do feel like there's just a level of like, it's hard unless you've experienced it. It's hard to really understand. For me, I was like, I recognize, like, if I put myself outside the situation, I recognize this isn't something that I really did wrong or that I need to confess. Like, if you had me take a test and it was just a hypothetical situation of someone else, I could tell you everything that didn't need to be confessed and how, according to what we've been taught, how we can overcome it. But that didn't change how I felt at all. Like, I recognized what I needed to do, but it didn't change how I felt. And so it was just, I think it made it hard because people don't really, they've never felt that way. And so I think no matter how empathetic someone is, they can't quite realize or, and and I think that that's kind of what makes it so hard about scrupulosity is I can get advice from someone else, but at the end of the day, I feel like my mind was like, yeah, but they don't know the full thing, and I probably didn't tell them this, so I'm just gonna disregard that. So I don't
Yeah.
know. And that's why I feel like you feel so alone too, in a way, because you're just like, and no one else understands exactly. what happens, so I have to trust my own judgment, but your judgment is dictated by your anxiety and OCD, so it doesn't really do anything.
Oh, yeah, that was all too relatable. Holy cow. That is so, so, so tough. Um, yeah, that was way too relatable. I was just like, "Wow, yep, that is exactly how it is." I kept when I got home from my mission and I was like, because I was trying to, like, tell people, like, what was going on, and it always just made it worse because I would try to explain all the details like you were saying, and then they would offer advice, and like you were saying, like, it would always be like, "Well, they didn't quite understand, like, this implication or this detail, and so that advice doesn't apply." The way that I came to describe it was loopholes. I was like, "There's always loopholes that they just don't
Yeah,
understand or that I'm, like,
that's true.
somehow an exception to this rule because of this," right? Like, yeah, and it is so isolating. I just started to believe that talking to other people about it really it made it worse because that's all that I'd experienced, right? Like, the more I talk about it, the more I, like, try to help people understand, the worse it gets because then they misunderstand and then they offer advice, and then I just think about that advice more and figure out how it doesn't apply to me. Anyways, and so I really felt like I just became stuck in this corner of silence because I feel like I need to talk to other people about this, but then I was like, every time I do, it makes it worse. So then I was like, I can't talk to anyone. And that extended to, like, therapists as well, right? That made that really, really difficult for me. Um, what has your experience looked like with have you met with a therapist? Have you had any, like the chuckles? Hopefully it's good.
Yeah, I I tried. I think I met I mean, obviously, I think I used church leaders in a way for a little while, but the problem with church leaders is they don't have a medical background in it, and so they help you the best they can, but obviously, I think that they always see it from a religious point of view, and so it kind of fed the problem. And then I saw therapists. I saw 2 therapists, through the school, my campus mental health thing or whatever. And the first guy, I went and he kept saying things like, "Oh, you guys," as in like everybody who has ever experienced scrupulosity. He's like, "You guys always do this." I was like, "This is personal." Like, it was hard because I feel like he took everything as like, this is all mental health related and nothing you're thinking is real. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, I do feel like my anxiety is based on some level of like, that's the problem is I do feel like I have morals. And so every time, like, sometimes I would do something that was genuinely wrong, but I didn't really have that filter to decipher how to address it. I felt like he handled everything. This is all in your head. And then I saw somebody else, another friend referred me to someone who is a bishop and a therapist. And I feel like he was like, oh, well, this is actually all like I feel like he handled it more from a religious point of view. And I just felt like it was hard for even though they were trained with like typical OCD and anxiety mental health training, felt like they still didn't really understand the mix of like, I don't know, I just felt like they kinda chose either this is all mental health or this is all religious. And so I felt like I had a difficult time. I think I could have found somebody that worked, but I feel like I think this is why podcasts like this are really good because I think there's not a lot of attention for scrupulosity, and I'm not sure at least I never really found any great, like, therapists or counselors that totally understood. So for me, the solution for me was getting on medication just helped so much. I feel like it made it so I could actually use my own judgment. But I wish that I had kept searching for a better counselor or therapist because I'm sure they're out there, but I didn't have a great experience. I just felt like it was difficult to find someone who really understood.
Yep, 100%. No, this struggle is so, so real. The first few therapists that I met with were not helpful. They actually didn't even know what scrupulosity was, and it was frustrating. It's hard to find therapists who not only, like, specialize in OCD and even more specifically scrupulosity, but who, like, actually understand, like, the implications of all of that. and can like help you navigate it in a healthy way. Did you ever do like was it mostly talk therapy or was there ever any like exposure therapy? Like, I guess if you're like working with someone who like specializes in OCD or who like knows OCD, that's usually what they go to just because that's like the gold standard treatment for OCD. Did you ever do any exposure therapy or was it mostly just talk therapy?
No, it was just talk therapy, and I don't maybe if I had stayed a little longer, it would have helped even with those 2 people I tried, but I think I just got so turned off from it from the first couple from the first visit with each one that I was like, "Okay, this isn't helping me." But maybe I should have stayed and let them go through their course, but
Yeah. No, that is so difficult. I think like from everything that I've experienced and that I've read, talk therapy makes OCD worse because you're discussing the content of the obsessions, like you're just obsessing about them more, right?
yeah. I think it did make me feel worse.
Yep, that is definitely what talk therapy like that was my experience with talk therapy. Um, yeah, but the exposure therapy, like I recently got connected with a therapist who specializes in scrupulosity and she does exposure therapy and it has been so, so, so helpful. Like I've been so grateful for that connection. Um, it is like so far from talk therapy. Like, yeah, we bring up different like fears and obsessions, but it's never in a sense of we're going to talk through this or we're going to analyze this or we're going to get to the bottom of this. It's always like, okay, this is triggering anxiety. Anxiety is the issue. And so we're going to address the underlying anxiety. And that's been so, so helpful. But yeah, I'm
Yeah.
glad that you're bringing this struggle to the light because this is such a struggle. Like the struggle of finding someone who can help you from a therapeutic standpoint. Yeah, that is difficult. Okay, the question though, did you have anything else on that?
No, I mean, I am just curious what does exposure therapy for scrupulosity look like?
Yeah. Okay. Oh, this is a good question. I'm glad we had space for that. Okay. Yeah. So I studied psychology and so I'd been introduced to lots of different like therapeutic modalities, right? So I'd been taught what exposure response prevention was. And the way that I was taught about it was like with a kid who's like terrified of dogs. Like if there's a very real anxiety about dogs, like the kid won't go near the dog. They're scared. Or like anytime they hear a dog bark, they like hide behind their parent, right? And so our teacher was like, okay, he was telling us about his daughter, actually. His daughter was very anxious around dogs, and she had this genuine fear of dogs. And so he was like, what exposure therapy looked like in this situation, we created exposures for her to be near or around dogs, and it gradually got like more intense in the sense of it gradually got like to the peak of her fear, right? So like the peak of her fear was being around dogs. So she couldn't like do that exposure initially, like it caused way too much anxiety. So they broke it down. They're like, okay, today we're going to drive to a dog shelter and we're just going to sit outside the dog shelter. And we're going to stay in the car, but we're just going to be close to dogs, like in the same area as dogs. Um, and so she was like so nervous, right? She was like, no, like I don't want to go to the dog shelter, right? Like even just the mention of a dog was like enough to trigger her anxiety, right? But they went and they like sat outside the dog shelter, and the whole goal was to help her experience contact with dogs, right? Like in her mind from a safe place, right? So she's like in the car, she's not by the dog, right? So he was able to just be like, okay, we're by the dog shelter and it's okay, right? Like you're safe, you're fine, right? So like kind of telling her nervous system, telling her brain, right? Like you're okay. Like we're thinking of dogs and we're okay. Then the next day they went up to the dog shelter and they like touched the door, right? Getting closer to the dogs. And then the next day it was going in and like hearing the dogs barking, right? So like gradually just getting closer to like her ultimate fear of like being with the dogs. And because they did it like gradually and step by step, right? Like she was able to be around dogs after they'd done like all these steps of like gradually getting to that point. Anyways, so the whole idea is let's break down this fear and then address the underlying anxiety and help your brain kind of learn, hey, this is not something that we need to be terrified of. This is not a legitimate threat to our safety, right? Okay, so I learned that in class and I was like, oh, that's great. And then I was like, none of my fears like are external.
Yeah.
They're all internal.
Today, you're gonna commit this sin, and you're just gonna realize it's okay. Like,
Yeah. I was like, that doesn't work. And this is where I was like, I need a therapist who like not only can tell me like how OCD works and how exposure works for OCD, because there's like contamination OCD, right? Like where they're like afraid of touching contaminated surfaces or like doorknobs or whatever. And like they can go touch the doorknobs, they can touch the surface and they can experience
But
like,
ours isn't
okay, I didn't get
tangible.
sick.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I'm like, this is like a totally different world because we're not talking about tangible things here that I can like I can't, for example, like die and go ask God if I'm like if my salvation is like okay, right? And then like come
Yeah.
like it just doesn't work. But that's what I'm terrified of, right? Like there were like these different fears of like, well, I'm terrified that like I've done something wrong in God's eyes. Anyways, or that like my salvation is on the line, or that I'm going to hell. Like I can't like you can't tangibly
Yeah.
you can't tangibly expose yourself to any of those things. And so that's actually what like really drove me to try to find a therapist because I was like I've learned all that I can about exposure therapy and I don't get how to do it for scrupulosity. Um, so the first like in my first meeting with the therapist, I was like, okay, I've done tons of work. Like I've read tons of like different books and I've done lots of self-help. And like I understand how exposure therapy works, like in practice, but I don't get how it works with scrupulosity. And okay, now we're finally like getting around to the real answer to your question here. That was a lot of background, but how it works with scrupulosity. Um, it's we do what's called written exposures. And there's different ways to do it. Like you can do written exposures and you can do like active exposures. I mostly do written exposures because lots of my fears are things that I'm thinking about over and over and over. So my therapist gave me this guided script. The therapist that I've been working with, she wrote a book called Freedom from Scrupulosity. She's done a lot of work in this area. She only works with people who experience scrupulosity. But her book, Freedom from Scrupulosity, she has resources in like the third section and she talks about exposure therapy and she has this template in the book. So you write down the triggering situation, like what, just, and very simply. The first time I did an exposure, I was like writing it all out in detail because I was like, I don't want to do this exposure wrong, right? And then I was like ruminating in the exposure, right? Like, anyways, you like the goal is to keep it simple and like to the point. I just write like one sentence of like, okay, what happened, right? And then the initial fearful thought, and then just like additional fearful thoughts. So like, I'm terrified that, right? Like this will happen. Then emotional reactions and physical symptoms, like how it's showing up in my body. Like I feel like super anxious and overwhelmed, like really pressured, right? Like whatever it is. And then urges to ritualize without following through. So this is kind of like, I view this one as like, what do I feel like I absolutely have to do right now or else something terrible will happen? And this is the compulsion, right? Like, what do I feel like I absolutely have to do right now? Like what's the anxiety drawing me to do? And then the next one is, what would this say about me if the worst happened? And then the core fear or worst case scenario. Um, so okay, maybe I'll just like share an example with you so this like comes to life a little more. Um, okay, so one of my biggest exposures that I've been doing for a while now is an exposure on uncertainty. So the exposure is just, I'm terrified of uncertainty. I don't know what's coming next in my future. I fear it will be something awful. I feel hesitant and tense. I feel overwhelmed, pressured, and rushed to get as much done now. I want to overanalyze past actions and prepare for many possibilities. If not, I am terrified I won't be able to build and live the life I want. If the worst happens, I am terrified I will always live in anxiety. I'm terrified I will fail to reach my full potential. Okay, so that's my exposure for uncertainty. So it's really just following the template to get your thoughts out in like an organized way of like, okay, this is what I'm terrified of. Like, this is what's causing the anxiety. And then I read it over. So I like rate my anxiety at the start on a scale of 1 to 10. So like on this particular day that I'm looking at right here, like when I started, like the anxiety was at a 10 with this uncertainty. And then every 10 minutes, I like re-rate the anxiety on a scale of 1 to 10. And usually the anxiety will like rise because I'm like engaging with the content, right? Like I'm thinking about it and it's like, oh my goodness, that would be awful if that actually happened. Um, so it'll like rise and then it like falls back down. So this exposure I did for like an hour and every 10 minutes I rated my anxiety and it started out at 10 and then it like made its way down to a 6 or a 7. So like still high, but like not as high. So the whole idea is like, exposing it's like with scrupulosity, like, you can't do tangible exposures, but you can, like, expose yourself to the ideas, right?
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so that's kind
it's
of
like being okay with being anxious. Like, being okay with
Yeah,
being terrified.
yep. Yeah,
Okay.
exposure therapy is, like, awful because, like, you're intentionally triggering anxiety for an hour to help your brain realize, like, this is okay. You know what I mean? It's awful. It's awful.
Yeah.
I'm like, "Who had this idea?" Like, let's take people who are anxious and intentionally make them more anxious, but it works. It, like, actually really works. Like, um well, the first one that I did when I was, like, trying to do it, like, on my own without a therapist, like, I was I didn't have the template or the outline, and when I started meeting with a therapist, she was like, "Oh, like, you need a guide, like, you need, um, just, like, an outline for the exposure or else it's gonna become rumination, like, or else you're just gonna be, like, running the fears over in a
Yeah, I was gonna say,
unproductive way."
for me, I feel like if I didn't have a good template or somebody showing me how, I feel like I would have just been like I'd just come out of it being like, "Yeah, I did do something wrong." Like, I feel
Yeah,
like I just
like, it's
convinced
totally
myself.
true. The
Yeah,
fear is gonna
I
happen.
confirmed it.
My anxiety's still at a 10. Yeah. That is
That's cool though. I feel like that's important for people to know that there is like a 'cause I feel like that's the problem that I always felt like I was like, this isn't tangible and it's like I want my mind wants to think about these things and when I think about them they get way worse. And so part of me I feel like for a while I was like I just need to like sleep because that's the only time when I'm not like suffering in a way. So I feel like it is good to know that there's things that we can do to like relieve the stress. Cause for a long time, for like a lot of high school, I just felt like I was just always like, I feel like I would get anxious and I felt like I didn't deserve to like have a good day. Like, I felt like I was like, I feel like I did this wrong. And so why should I just go off and like hang out with my friends and pretend like nothing's wrong when I know that something super serious is going on? So I feel like it's good for people to know that there's ways to reduce the stress too.
yeah. No, that is so real. It just, like, taints everything. Yeah. I was gonna say something else on that line, though, with the oh, yeah. I was, um I was telling my therapist we were, like, working through something that I was like, "I've realized that I am, like I'm just thinking about this specific thing constantly." Anyways, and I was, like, genuinely terrified of it, and I was like, "But I'm terrified that if I do an exposure of it, I'm just gonna be thinking about it more, and it's gonna make it worse." Um, and she was like, "Well, here's the truth. You're already thinking about this 24/7. So, why don't we think about it, like, in a structured way that could help, like, alleviate the anxiety in the long run
Mhm.
instead of just, like, continuing to think about it." Like, she was like, "You're already thinking about it." Like, that was the point. And I was like, "Oh,
Yeah,
you got me
that's
there."
true.
Like, I'm already thinking
Yeah,
about it 24/7. So,
yeah,
yeah,
that's a good point.
I have found exposures to be so, so helpful, but you definitely this is a good discussion, though, because yeah, I guess even just, like, sharing, like, different exposures that I've already done, like, that's that's all I feel like I would've really needed to, like, get started on my own was just, like, an example of, like, "Okay, this is how this could look," or, like, "This is what the template would be," right? Like, "Here's how to do an exposure." Yeah, because so much of the struggle with
Yeah,
scrupulosity is that disconnect of, like, it doesn't make sense for this space.
yeah, that's
Okay, that
cool.
was a fun discussion. That was really interesting. Okay, the big question. How or when did you realize or, like, come to understand that you were experiencing scrupulosity, and how did that come about? Like, how did it go from just, like, an experience with anxiety and guilt and confession to being like, "I think this is scrupulosity."
Hmm. At some point in late high school, no, it might have been. I think it was after I graduated high school. Um, Maybe in the space between the summer after I graduated high school, I started to recognize that I'm having thoughts that don't even make sense. And I think my mom might have shared something about scrupulosity with me. I think it did help. It helped to recognize like, oh, okay, so there's like this is actually a thing, and it's not just like having anxious thoughts or something, but it's like there's like an even more there's like a definition for what I'm experiencing. I feel like that helped, and I think it helped me to be able to feel more comfortable opening up to other people because sometimes I was scared to tell people because I was like nobody understands, and I think part of it too is there's kind of a fear of like, and I still feel like it's something that people need to be more okay with. I feel like there's like a, oh, you're a goody goody if you experience scrupulosity. I'm like, okay, sorry, like I didn't choose this. And also like what's wrong with wanting to like I'm like, okay, if I didn't experience anxiety, I probably wouldn't like feel like I'd be able to recognize these things better and I wouldn't seem like such a giddy giddy. But I feel like I feel like knowing that scrupulosity is a thing helped me to be able to explain it to others and be like, yeah, a lot of it is it's anxiety over things and it makes me feel like this way rather than just trying to explain to people like, yeah, I did this wrong. I'm terrible. I'm terrible. Like I feel like helps people realize, okay, this person isn't actually super crazy about being righteous or whatever. They're just trying to do their best, but they have anxiety and OCD about what's happening, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yes. No, definitely. Yeah, it's very helpful in, like, in describing that was so much of where I was like, I felt like I just had to be quiet because I was like, "I don't even know what I'm experiencing." Like, there's no way to, like, describe this to other people. But, like, having a name for it, having something that they could, like it was just something that felt more tangible, right? Like, it is a thing, and it's called scrupulosity, right? Yeah, no, that's really helpful. So, did your mom, like I'm just still so curious as to how this all came about, like, had she read, like, articles on it? Do you know?
Well, I think that my mom had a form of it like when she was recently married. Like I know she had lots of anxiety and she would repeat thoughts in her mind and she went years without sharing it because I think back in like in her childhood, she was I feel like that was still the time when people would have crazy mental health issues and they'd be sent to a mental hospital or something. And like I feel like she was just always scared to open up. And so I think as time has gone on, she's researched things more and more and like tried to understand what she went through. So I think she saw an article. I remember seeing an article about someone who served a church mission and had scrupulosity. And that's the first time I remember seeing like some media or something about it. So I think she saw that and sent it to me. That's the first time I like remember hearing about scrupulosity. I don't know when it was, but I remember Googling it too and feeling like very validated.
I'm so glad, that's the best. There was, like, a definite sense of relief. I was like, "Oh, happy day. Okay, this is a
I was like,
thing."
this is exactly how I feel. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was me when I read the article. I was like, "Mom, if there's anything that I experienced, it was this." Like, yeah, I'm so glad that there are different things like that out there. Well, just wrapping up, I would just love to hear Jesus's role in your journey, like how your relationship with him has changed and been like shaped by this struggle. And then just like lastly, your message to those that are currently struggling. So I guess we can just start with Jesus's role in your journey. Like how has your relationship with him changed and been shaped by this struggle?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like, especially throughout high school, when it was just on my mind every day, I feel like I didn't really like to think about it because the more I thought about the temple or Jesus or trying to do the right thing, the more I felt like I wasn't living up to it, and the worse I felt. And so it was just like this struggle where I felt like I couldn't. I just never really felt like I had a relationship with Jesus Christ because just always made things kind of made me feel worse. I feel like it made it much harder to be in relationships because my anxiety was so focused on like sexual sin and things like that. But it made it so on my mission, I could focus a little bit more on Jesus Christ. And I think that helped, but I still felt like I didn't quite have a lot of experiences with feeling the Holy Ghost because I was still kind of in that mindset. Um, yeah, I just think as I've gotten help and been able to think more clearly, I think I'm understanding what it means just to live the values that Jesus Christ taught. And I think that has brought me a lot of peace, knowing that I feel like we're taught you either have the Holy Ghost or you don't. Whereas I feel like it's more healthy during my process of trying to, um, and I'm still going through it, but I think I'm a much better place than I used to. I think it was really helpful for me to realize that the Spirit doesn't have to just be like, do I have the Holy Ghost or do I not? Like you can be feeling like you're a bad person and still go serve somebody. And at least from serving someone, you're feeling a little piece of the Spirit of Christ by living the way he would. And I think that's helped me. And in a way, I feel like I wouldn't have that point of view if I hadn't have struggled with scrupulosity for so long, because I feel like it's taught me to appreciate the simplicity of the Spirit of Christ rather than, I feel like so much of my life I've thought like, I either have the Spirit or I don't. And I'm like, what even is a spirit? I don't know, but I think it's being blocked because of these things I'm doing. And I feel like it's helped me to take a step back and realize like the Spirit comes when we're just doing our best to live the way Christ would. And so it's helped me to focus less on, am I checking the boxes? I feel like scrupulosity makes you want to focus on what are all the things I'm doing wrong. And I think it's almost Satan's way of trying to distract. Like, I don't think Satan gives us scrupulosity, but I think he uses it against us as a way to distract us and be like, oh, yeah, think about all these things you're doing wrong, trying to debilitate us. Because I think most people who are experiencing it are people that genuinely just want to do the right thing. Like, I think it's a sign that you have morals. And so I think Satan's like, yeah, we need to use this against them. But I think it's helped me to think of Jesus Christ as someone who cares a lot more about, like, rather than thinking, what are things you're doing wrong? Like, what are things I could be doing right? Like, I think it really helped me to focus on what would Jesus Christ do, and like studying just his life helps me to get out of that anxiety cycle and focus more on just this is how Jesus Christ would live. And in turn, I feel like I experience the Spirit of Christ, just at least in the sense of I feel goodness in trying to do the things that he would.
That that's awesome. It's sounding like you're stepping into this reality of relationship with Jesus and moving further away from this like checklist must do or have to do in order to experience or feel some sort of spirit, right? Like it's just like, okay, no, like Jesus is just inviting us to relationship with him, right? And it's sounding like that's so much of kind of the reality that you've come to through this struggle, right? Just that's what it's all about. It's about relationship with Jesus and like learning about him and his life and seeking to align with that. Um, that is so beautiful. Okay, and then lastly, just your message to those who are currently struggling with scrupulosity. If you could share something simple with them, what would it be?
I mean, I I feel like it's important to realize that I'm at, if I was at a 10 for most of my life, like basically from the time I was 12 to 22, I feel like for a decade of my life, I experienced it every single day, like all day. And if I was at a 10 then, I feel like I'm at like a 1 or a 2 now. Like I really almost feel like I've experienced total relief. Like I still have some bad days, but I just feel like it's important for people to realize that you can struggle with it for a decade and things can get better. And for me, I don't think it's a silver bullet, but for me, I felt like getting on medication was what helped me. It was like, it is a miracle from God that I found a medication that helped me. Cause I got to the point where I remember one night I stayed up like the whole night pacing in my house because I felt like I was going to like die. I don't know. It was just such a terrible level of doom. And then my wife Liv was like, you need to try something like it, maybe medication can help. And for me, I know it doesn't help everyone, but I feel very fortunate that for me, like it it really, really helped me. And I think I'm at the point now with the help of medication where I can think a lot more clearly and talk myself down from things. And so I think that's just something important that people realize that there's things we can try, like there's medication, there's exposure therapy, I think there's an increasing number of people that specialize in it. There's this podcast. I feel like it's important for people to realize there really are steps we can take and we don't have to just live in our own heads for our whole life. I think that it's hard to just perfectly be cured, but I think that there's steps we can take to really find relief.
Such a hopeful message, right? Like there is help, there is hope. Um, Thanks for highlighting that, Quinn, not only in these final comments, but also throughout the interview. It's been so fun to hear pieces of your story and pieces of your experience. And I'm truthfully just really grateful for your willingness to like come on and to share. I just love connecting with people who also experience it. It's so fun because it's so validating, right? I'm like, okay, this is a thing. This is a real struggle. There are real people that are experiencing this real time. And that connection is just, it has been so helpful for me. So thank you so much for just for being willing. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. This is a really good thing. Like I think this helps a lot of people.
That is the hope. That's the goal. Okay, sweet. Well, thank you so much, Quinn, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, you too. Thanks, Sariah.